Hello, everyone. I'm just going to wait a few moments for people to join before we start this evening. I see the numbers going up. Everyone's joining, which is great. Just give it another few seconds. Right, even though the numbers are still rising, they've studied a bit, so I'm going to do the introductions because I'm mindful of time. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining this evening for our final webinar of this series. Tonight we have Lisa and Debbie sharing their valuable insights on caring for an adult dependent with BDD. We know and recognise that this is a really vast topic and it wouldn't be possible to cover all aspects in just 1 hour. So they've chosen to focus on some key areas such as day-to-day practicalities, including the role of reassurance, the benefits of encouraging some structure or focus during the day, even if your loved one is housebound, finances, and the importance of self-compassion. Although there won't be time for a live Q&A this evening, please do feel able to add your questions in the Q&A or the chat box with your email address, and we'll endeavour to get back to you as soon as possible. So Lisa and Debbie, I'm going to disappear, and it's going to be over to you to introduce yourselves.
Good evening. I think I'm going to go first. So my name's Debbie. I am a mom, fundamentally. I've cared for my son Oliver since really BDD first entered his life in a way that we started to notice behavioural change when he was about 16. He's 32 now. He's always lived at home. He's still at home. I've been my family's breadwinner, so I've had to work, and I have really been his primary caregiver for his entire adult life. I won't go too much into Oliver's story. You can hear it on the BDD Foundation podcast, Beating BDD. I think he's episode 9 and 10. He spoke for a couple of hours on that podcast, so you can get some insight into the challenges that he has had over the years. I know Kitty's going to put the link to that in the chat for anybody that wants to see that. And I've also recorded a podcast for that series with my other son. I have 2 sons. Oliver's brother is a couple of years older than him. And as a parent, I just want to acknowledge that if we do have other children in our lives, other adult children, you know, I've had a challenge. It's difficult for them as well. So Daniel and I also recorded a podcast, so feel free to listen to that as well and you hear a little bit more about my story. Over to Lisa.
Thank you, Debbie. My name's Lisa Williams. I'm the manager and one of the therapists at the Anxiety Disorder Residential Unit, which is based at the Bethlem Royal Hospital in South East London, in West Wickham, Beckenham area. We're a 17-bedded unit. We are residential. People come and live with us for 16 weeks. And we're very fortunate to have a wonderful, compassionate team who do very intensive therapy, CBT therapy, compassion-focused therapy. Our clients and residents have also the full access to occupational therapy and yoga and lots of other things that really help people actually develop, gain independence, but also challenge their OCD and BDD and emetophobia and PTSD, all the anxiety disorders in a compassionate environment. We take referrals from NHS clients and now self-funded clients too. Like I said, we're a small team made up of occupational therapists, drama therapy. We've got our own gut cafe as well, where people can learn vocational skills with barista training, making sourdough bread. We've got a bread oven. So it's a very holistic team, and we're fortunate actually to be in gorgeous grounds. I think it's over 90 acres of green parkland, and so we've got orchards, and it's just a very nice space to be. It's very unlike other hospital settings. But yeah, hopefully we will work through some of these things today, and many of you will get some insight into the treatment we do, but also especially from Debbie, who is a mother of somebody with BDD and has great insights. Thanks, Debbie. So should we move on to the first topic which we talked about, which was reassurance? Yeah.
Yep.
Would you like me to start, Debbie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So I guess we
I should just say it's never been something I've found easy, so I'll get to my experience of that, and hopefully touch other parents will feel the same. But Lisa's come at that from a clinical perspective.
Yeah, I guess we talked earlier, Debbie, didn't we? And we've talked before now, saying how difficult reassurance is. And not only for the person that is really struggling with BDD and the distress that it causes them, but how difficult it is for parents and carers and lovers and friends that really want to help the person in distress and don't like to see them in pain, and how upsetting it can be. And I guess we know through the treatment we offer that reassurance, if we give reassurance in the moment, it may offer short-term relief, but then the relief isn't long-lasting, and the person with BDD is then seeking reassurance again to help them feel better. So we know that actually it serves as like it's in some ways it's an unhelpful behaviour. And I guess in the past, I guess we used to cut off reassurance completely, but that can often feel like punishment to the person that is requiring reassurance in the moment, and it can make them feel even more distressed. And I guess for many of the clients that we work with, if we were to not give reassurance in the moment, it can not only feel like a punishment, but it can also feel very isolating, and the person can feel very lonely in their distress. So I guess from a compassionate mind, what we're trying to do is support the client that is needing reassurance in the moment, but in a way that actually validates how they're feeling, validates the distress that they're going through, and says, actually, what do you need in this moment? And I'm seeing you in distress, and that we've set up a conversation before the reassurance is required to know actually what to do in those moments. So open communication, I guess we've talked about, Debbie, is vitally important. Yeah, it's absolutely. Knowing that actually when I'm in distress in that moment and I'm needing reassurance, having an alternative to reassurance that you can offer your loved one, or your child in distress, or your lover in distress, is really valuable. So sometimes somebody with BDD may say in those moments, actually, I feel desperately alone, I feel very distressed, and I need somebody to give me a hug, or I need somebody to distract me by going out for a walk, for example, or to just sit with me, to not say anything, but just to know that they're close to me. So everybody, I guess, is an individual, and everybody needs something different in those moments. But having those open conversations about saying to your loved one, what do you need in those moments? How can I best support you? So being a person of support can really help that person.
And without doubt, from parents' perspective, reassurance and stepping back from that reassurance has definitely been one of the hardest parts of me supporting Oliver over the years, dealing with the constant need for reassurance, because we know that BDD demands answers. It demands answers from us, and, in the moment, as you said. And at first, like most parents, we think we're helping. We think we're helping the situation, we're responding, we're soothing their fears, we are making sure they have whatever they need to be able to feel just right, to be able to focus on what they might need to be doing in the next 10 minutes or whatever. And I have to admit that I fed the cycle. I probably still do. And we've possibly read the textbook. I know I've read plenty of textbooks and tells us not to do that. But the reality is, when you are faced with that there and then in front of you, it's really difficult to follow that kind of guidance, and stepping back is incredibly difficult. What I will say is, as he has got older, it's become easier. When Oliver was 18, the prospect of him moving on with his life seemed so far away. He's now 32, And I now see my job. He's a grown man, not he's a grown adult man now, rather than a young adult. And my view now, I now see my position as helping him build resilience to be able to deal with that. So he's not looking for reassurance. And I, started saying things like, you're stronger than you think. I know it feels hard right now. And doing things like Lisa said. So just sitting with him, just sitting on the stairs, sometimes even outside his room or outside the bathroom, not being in his space, not being in front of him, not challenging him, but him knowing I was there. Immediately in the immediate vicinity. It still feels awful. I'm not gonna soft soap that. It still feels awful, and I still feel guilty at not being able to soothe his distress, and which can be overwhelming. But we must remind ourselves that by not giving that reassurance, we're not failing as parents. We really are helping them get stronger, and that's got to be our ultimate aim. And over time, and it has taken time, again, I won't sugarcoat that, it's not something that'll happen overnight, but over time I have definitely seen him grow stronger and build resilience and be able to move away from some of that reassurance seeking, which has been a turning point for him and for all of us. So it's not easy thing for parents to do.
And there's also something about both the client with BDD and the family with BDD saying, right, we're going to start this day again, and then sometimes it can go really well, and you can have a good day where you actually have managed the reassurance seeking in a really compassionate way by doing, facing the BDD together.
And then sometimes we might have started the day again very late on in the day.
Yes.
So let's not give up at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Sometimes we've reached that. It's been into the evening when we've reached that point, but we have adopted that approach sometimes.
And also, I guess it's really important, Debbie, isn't it, to realise that when the distress gets so, it can feel unbearable sometimes to see your loved one in that amount of distress. And you think, well, I've tried not to give reassurance in that moment. And then an hour, 2 hours may pass, and you're getting really, really tired, aren't you? And you really want to help that person out of distress. And it feels like you're giving in that moment. And you can feel really guilty. Oh, no, I've done it again. But I think it's about having compassion for, it's not about promising, but it's about trying, isn't it? And like you said, it's moment by moment. In this moment, I found it really difficult, but actually there's now another moment that we can try again.
Absolutely. And, again, back to when Oliver was 18, we would have felt maybe the day was over and we'd ruined it, and I'd given in, and it's all a bit of a disaster. But now we're able to reset. If we've reset, like I say, into the evening, even maybe let's start the day again, and not giving up on that. But yeah, you're right. It's tiring, it's wearing, and sometimes you just want, you will give in. You will feel like you're giving in to soothe, to facilitate, to allow the day to move on. Especially if you're having to go to work, like I've done, like I had to do. The day is functioning, or you've got other children, you've got other responsibilities, the day is carrying on, and sometimes giving in is the only way you can carry on with your day. And we mustn't beat ourselves up over that. You must forgive yourself for that, so that you can move, you can all move forward. Because carrying guilt, I know we're going to talk about, I'm going to touch on guilt a bit later, but carrying that guilt is not helpful for anybody.
Just before I forget, I had one lovely client that I work with, and her partner used to say, I love you, but I'm finding the BDD behavior really difficult right now. And it was separating out the person from the behavior. And I find that really
100%. 100%.
I've used it with my kids a lot, Debbie.
100%. We talk about BDD Oliver and real Oliver. And yes, I completely concur with that.
I'm just aware of time, so I guess we might have to move on to our next topic, Debbie.
Yeah.
Are we doing okay?
Yeah, we're doing okay.
So the next thing we were talking about is keeping busy.
Yeah.
And I know you've got some really good points about this, Debbie, but I guess it's about having, what can be really helpful is feeling like you've got some structure in the day.
Yeah.
Feeling like you're doing stuff with purpose.
Yeah.
Feeling like you're connected to other human beings, or as one client said to me, other breathing things, you know, whether it's plants or humans, but it's things that, you know, you feel like you're waking up and you've got something you're caring for, I guess.
Yeah.
But realizing that sometimes we can set our aims quite high and then not get to those places and feel really down on ourselves that we haven't managed to do it. So I guess a big thing we do at ADRU is trying to break down ideas into very small achievable chunks, and try and lean into our values every day. So we're thinking about a valued direction. Is this moving me towards the version of me that I want to now grow? And what can help me to flourish in this moment?
Yeah.
And it may be like, oh, sorry, Debbie.
So in terms of keeping busy, especially when your loved one might be housebound. So Oliver was housebound for 3 years. He never left the house from age 19 to 22, 21, 22 maybe. So he didn't leave the house, didn't have a job, or didn't have any connection with the outside world at all, to be fair. So trying to keep him engaged in something. He'd always been an intelligent child at school. And he developed a real interest in history. And in fact, I'm hoping one day that he might go to university and do a degree in history at some point in the future. He developed a real interest in history, and he read and watched documentaries and had real, like, almost obsessional, dare I use that word, in the outbreak, British history, particularly 20th century history. So what he doesn't know about the outbreak of the Second World War, you could write on a postcard. So what that shows to me is his ability to research, to learn, to be focused on something is immense, because he literally could take on any professor of history on that topic. He developed a real interest in something. And without that, who knows where he might have been? Without really developing an interest in that, who knows where he would be? So I think if we are dealing with our loved one that is housebound, creating some kind of structure to the day, again, very difficult, because throughout some of that period, Oliver led a nocturnal life. He was asleep all day and awake all night, classic avoidance tactics, so he didn't have to see even me. And that's quite hard to break that routine. But trying to engage them into something that they find an interest in, online courses or whatever. And bear in mind, we're talking about 10 years ago. Oliver's 32 now. This is when he was 22, so 10 years ago. I think that space has developed in the last 10 years. I think there's far more material now out there online that people can do at home that might, just keep them focused, really.
And there's also, I guess, there's other things that some individuals might want to do things on their own independently, but there may be other things that you can do as a family or together, or with your partner together. So, things that we'd find in cooking together can be a really lovely thing, and then you get to eat together maybe. But there's conversations outside of the BDD that's happening if you're having those activities together.
Yes. That's really important, to not try when you're consumed. Again, I'm going to say it's very difficult. There was a long time when the only conversation I had with Oliver was about his BDD. And I think that's damaging. I think by doing some activity that forces you to have conversations about something else, it's good for both of you.
Yeah. Thanks, Debbie. And then the other thing is around finances. And I guess Adru, I see a wide range of clients really. Some people that have never worked because of BDD maybe. Some people that have started university and had to leave university because of their BDD. Some people that have been in full-time jobs and because of the BDD getting too distressing or finding that their checking behaviour is getting in the way of getting to work on time, they've lost their jobs or they've had to put their job on hold to get treatment. So I guess financial pressures can affect each and every one of the clients that we see in many, many different ways. And some people are fortunate enough to have the support of working people within their families, whilst others are not. And I guess it's about really helping people from any financial background, isn't it? And I think it can be really, really challenging, especially when you haven't got somebody championing or getting you through services or filling out forms. It can be really hard. But I guess there's certain things that advocates can really help with, and there's advocates in every local area. And I think sometimes the reasonable adjustments that can be made at work, people sometimes are unaware of those. But it does mean that you have to talk about your BDD. And I think shame can get in the way of talking about your BDD really openly, or fear of judgment. And then without knowing the information about your BDD, many workplaces don't understand either, Debbie, do they? And I know you've got personal experience of that.
I have extensive experience in this space, but I should just say that finance is undoubtedly a very, very challenging area to navigate. And when Oliver was 18, I really didn't care whether he had a job or he could, because his future seemed so far away. He's 32 now, and I'm 57, and I'm aware that I support him. He you know, and I'm aware that sorry to be maudlin, but I'm aware of my own mortality and the fact that we all want our loved one to be independent. It's the goal that we have when we have our children, is that they'll live an independent life. And so it has intensified over time. My focus on trying to get him into an independent living arrangement has intensified over time, and I've no doubt it will intensify as he gets older. I mentioned Oliver was housebound. He didn't work for a very long time, and he now works for a high street retailer, the leading probably the only department store left. I'll let you work out who he works for. Well, he works for Lewis. He says it on his podcast, so I'll call them out. And they have been great. However, I have still had to battle. There has still been a battle. I've had 2 litigation cases with them on the whole concept of reasonable adjustments and making accommodations for his disability. He works 26 hours a week. He's now gets there every day on time. It takes commitment from me to make sure that happens, and I do that because I want him to have agency, to have some pounds in his pocket. But it's very, very challenging, and there's no easy answer to it. You know, I'm lucky I have a car, I can take him, I make sure he's there on time, but it's requiring input from me. It's requiring input from me as his mother. And obviously I want to get to a situation where he doesn't require input from me. That's the whole point. My advice on this is twofold, and I talked about it earlier. Full disclosure, tell people. For me, I told my employer, look, this is what I deal with at home. Getting to that point of full disclosure moment where you are shedding the shame, and I think I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, is transformational. It's been transformational for us. It's been transformational for Oliver. Oliver didn't tell John Lewis that he had BDD when he applied for the job. I'll call a spade a spade. He didn't tell them because he didn't need to tell them. You don't have to declare it. He didn't tell them, and got the job, and he made it through his probation. Don't really know how he made it, but he did. and there was a crisis at work. They had a fire alarm go off in the building. In fact, it was a bomb scare, and he had to leave, and he couldn't leave the building. They had to get an ambulance to take him out of the building. It was actually quite catastrophic.
Mm.
At that point, we had to disclose what was going on. We disclosed everything, cards on the table, and we said, look, we need your support to keep you in the workplace. And they did. Now, he works for John Lewis. I would hope that they would support him, and I recognise that not everybody is lucky enough to have an employer who will support them in that way. But try and find somebody. And I would say that when you get to that point where your loved one will talk about it, as it is transformational in shedding the shame that goes along with this condition, because we know that those feelings of shame for our loved one are one of the most powerful feelings that they're feeling, and us as parents, we feel that too. And I'll talk about how that has impacted how we deal with that, or don't, as the case may be.
And I guess it's worth mentioning, Debbie, isn't it, about, you know, on Sunday night, and you can all be quite hopeful as a family that, you know, what the person with BDD, your loved one, is going to go to work in the morning, and for all intents and purposes, you're all set for that to happen. But as we know, distress can get in the way, can't it? And then the person can't get to work, or you think they've left in their car to go to work, and then they're stuck in the car park and they can't enter the building. And all these things make it really, really challenging, I think. And I think it's about having compassion for yourselves as the person with BDD, but also the family that have a lot of expectation around that person going to work. And it can feel quite painful, can't it, when everything, you think all the ducks are in a row, and then something happens like that, and it can be really challenging to come back from that, because a person with BDD feels often quite ashamed that they're unable to get to work.
Yeah, and something that Oliver's only recently said to me in recent years is, not only has he had to deal with his own feelings of guilt, shame, distress, he's also had to deal with seeing me. So he's got his own feelings, and then knowing what that's done to me compounds the situation for him. And I thought about that and thought, yeah, he's probably right. So again, that when we started having conversations like that, again, that was pretty transformational in me changing my perception on things and leaving that guilt behind. Because I think when he first told me what the problem was, and it took him 10 years to tell me what was really going on. He was 26 when he told me, and he started being ill when he was 16. So it took 10 years for him to actually speak. And I couldn't stop thinking, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? I replayed all the decisions I'd made with him growing up. What have I caused it? What did I do wrong? Why has this happened? And it's pretty relentless, that feeling of guilt, endless. And then I've talked about shame. Why has this happened to me? Why has it happened to my child? What will other people think? What will they think of me? What will they think of my child? And something I think we don't talk about a lot, and it's quite painful to admit the truth, but I was very jealous. I have a couple of good girlfriends who we met when we were pregnant, antenatal class, and our children are all the same age. And you see them going off doing their teenage things, going on holiday, driving cars and getting jobs, having boyfriends and girlfriends, doing those normal things. And my son was never doing any of that. And I felt jealous of my friends and what their lives were, how their children were developing. And it's, as I say, it's quite painful to admit that. Jealousy is a really powerful emotion, and it's not something that we talk about frequently. And that voice in my head, that voice, feelings of shame and guilt. The truth is, there were lots of times that I wished Oliver wasn't my son. I wished he wasn't the person he was. And, you know, it's hard, it's painful to admit that, but it doesn't make me a bad person, doesn't make me a bad mother. It just really compounds the difficulties that we have to deal with and the pernicious nature of either BDD or OCD. You know, parents were dealing with loved ones that have OCD, and we have to realise that our guilt does not help our loved one. It keeps us stuck where we are. It doesn't help them, and I started to focus on what I could do to change that. Probably about 4 or 5 years ago. So,
thanks, Debbie. I think it's that you've been very honest about how it made you feel, and I think, and being really authentic like that, I think it's very connecting, and I'm sure there's people here listening to that share very similar feelings to you. Yeah.
And I think it would be a timely point for me to talk about how I've let that go, because I think that is when we talk about tips for other parents, is how do we let go of that? How do we let go of the guilt? How do we let go of the jealousy that I felt? How do we let go of the feelings of shame? No doubt the feelings of shame went. I referred to our podcasts earlier on. Recording those podcasts, that was the first time Oliver had ever spoken publicly about his condition. So when you listen to it, you'll probably hear it in his voice. It was the first time. It was without doubt transformational. From that day forward, things changed. So yeah. I can only say, based on my experience, keeping the lines of dialogue open with your loved one and getting them to speak openly to you about how they're feeling is important, because it took 10 years, but he got there in the end.
Yeah.
And how did I move on? Well, letting go of jealousy. I call it my journey to acceptance. I forgive myself. No one's perfect. I probably did make some mistakes. I'd gone through a divorce when Oliver was 12. Oliver doesn't have a relationship with his father. He talks about that on podcasts. Was that a catalyst? Who knows? I forgive myself. I'm not perfect. I did the best I could with the knowledge I had at the time. And that's, I think, what we think of. I sat down with Oliver. I talked about things I did wrong. We forgave each other. He forgave bad things he'd said to me, bad things he's done to me. We forgave each other. And accepting that I wasn't failing, but simply just living through a really difficult experience was pretty crucial. I embraced compassion. Importantly, compassion for Oliver, but also for myself, and also for other people. I won't admit, also for other people. And jealousy was one of the hardest things for me to move on from, because it's not something as I said earlier, it's not something we talk about very often, definitely as parents, because it just feels a bit wrong comparing our growing adults to other people. It just feels a bit wrong. But the truth is, it's quite natural that we compare. We look at their peer groups. It's quite natural for us. And we wonder why people seem to be having it easier than us. But I reframed that into gratitude. I started looking at what Oliver did have. What were the strings in his bow? And instead of focusing on what other people had, I started to look at what we had. And he's developed into the most resilient young man with some real skills for like I say, his research, what he learned, his ability to focus. There are some positives. And we've built a real deep connection, in fact, within all our family. It hasn't erased those feelings of jealousy. I won't lie. I still look at him and wish that he was going on holidays with his friends, that he's still not quite able to do. But it has definitely given me a new perspective. And I reached out for support, connecting with other parents. Going to our first support group again I just sat there and cried the whole time. Yeah. But it was also very important to see other people and be able to talk to other people. And we've managed to shed the shame of this condition, and that's been life-changing, to shed that shame and be able to talk about it. I now talk to anyone and everybody that will listen about Oliver, about his condition. I educate people. We have a little card with his podcast on. We give it out to people. We've become advocates, and that's been pretty important.
Yeah.
That's been pretty important on moving forward.
I think something that's really struck me, Debbie, is communication, and being, you know, open communication and connecting with other people. And I think it's made me think of that podcast called The Power of Vulnerability that Brené Brown talks about. Have you seen that?
I haven't.
Yeah, but I guess it's that ability to connect with each other. And she says there's nothing more powerful than someone saying "me too," and that support group of having other people that really understand what you're going through.
Yeah.
And when I was thinking about work environments, I think, only from my own perspective of working at ADRU, I think a lot of universities have support. You know, they have an amazing supervisors often in welfare that can support people that are going through university. And actually, I know there's some workplaces out there that are not so supportive, but there are definitely many workplaces that very much support people with mental health. I think sometimes we only hear about those environments that are not so positive, but I'm more and more surprised about the amount of support that people are offered, actually, and encouraged by that. But I think it's about connection, isn't it? And it's about reaching out, but it takes a lot of courage to talk about your own mental health, to talk about the things that you feel ashamed about. But somehow, once you start on that journey of being open, you find the benefits in it, and it can be really helpful.
It's a bit like, you know, a snowball rolling down a hill. It's Gallop's pace as it goes. That's how I describe it. We call it our full disclosure moment. The difficulty I found in my experience is getting to that point.
Yeah.
So again, never giving up on the journey of getting to that point, because we know that a lot of BDD sufferers aren't able to speak about what is the real problem. We saw don't think for those 10 years that we were just sat indoors wondering we saw countless medical professionals. He lied the whole time. Every time we saw somebody, he lied about what was really going on. I was asked to leave countless appointments because I would try and move the conversation in the right direction. And of course, he's an adult at this point. So the doctor just asked me to leave because they actually want the consultation with the patient, not with the mother. They would say, you need to leave. And I'd be like, he's lying. Because it wasn't because he's a liar. It's because he could not put the words to what was really going on.
Yeah.
And it took a long time. So one of my key messages is about never giving up on getting to that point. If you have a loved one that is not at that point yet, that has not reached out, has not got to that point, and has not reached out to you, although you might know. I've done a lot of home. I knew all those 10 years, I knew what was going on. He could never. I'd say to him, I think you have this, but you know, and there would be an argument, and it would, you know, there'd be a lot of distress. So I always knew, but until, and every doctor will say the same thing, until they want to help and support themselves, nobody's forcing you into therapy. And Oliver, again, we talk about, he was sectioned. He has tried to take his own life twice. So we've had some very serious medical intervention times. But even through that, even in the middle of that, it still did not speak about BDD. So once we got, we never gave up. I never gave up again, I'm coming at this from a parent, and getting at that, once we got to that point, it's a bit like that. We gathered pace. Yeah. Things gathered pace. We gathered some pace. He's not out of the woods, but he's definitely living a life now that I never dreamt possible 10 years ago. Never dreamt possible. So that message of not giving up, is it was important to me to never give up. And sometimes this is a question I can't really answer when people say, how did you never give up? I don't know. I don't know. I just every day thought today was going to be different, and just never gave up, because I very early on was able to split the BDD Oliver and real Oliver. I knew he was in there. I knew he was in there somewhere. But that two-way communication, keeping it open, is one of the most valuable things.
And I guess also, Debbie, for carers that may be thinking, should I come to a support group, or we've got a carers group at ADRU, maybe like thinking, should I do that or not? I think what you said is it's been invaluable for you, hasn't it, to meet other people that are going through very similar things, so you feel supportive and supporting each other.
Definitely. We went to the first one. All of them stormed out about 4 times. He actually sat underneath his coat the whole time we were there. I cried the whole time. We drove home, and he said, never, ever ask me to do anything like that again. I'm never going again. And by the time we got home, we were an hour drive away. He changed his mind. So, and we went again, and we went again, and we went again. And it was never easy, but we carried on. And without, again, that communication, seeing other people, hearing other people, hearing other people's experiences firsthand, face to face. Back then, it was before COVID, so we were face to face. We actually saw people, because that was crucial, because we had to leave the house to go to, I know COVID came and we moved on to Zoom and things, and that's great. But for people who are struggling to leave the house, leaving the house, going somewhere was very important. Having the routine on that Sunday, that's where we're going. That was very important.
Thanks, Debbie. And so I guess the final part that we wanted to talk about was self-compassion, and having compassion for yourselves as carers is really vital, isn't it? Even though it can feel paper thin at times, can't it? Because you can be, like you said, you can have a very high self-criticism yourself. It can be really hard to be kind to yourself, or to say nice things to yourself when you're really struggling, or feel that you're unable to problem solve for your loved one, or your son or your daughter.
Very much so. And I blamed myself, and I think I blamed myself for a long time. I had that guilt and blame and something I'd done, and so I had zero compassion for myself for a very long time. Zero, to be fair. And I divorced when Oliver was 12. The thought of ever having even a life of my own, letting alone maybe remarrying or or developing some kind of life of my own, was just out of the question, because I had why would I want to have a life of my own? Because I was so consumed by immediate care for him, for Oliver, and no care for myself. So kind of trying to set some time, even if it's just in the day, for yourself, even if you just, for me, shut my bedroom door, have an hour in the evening, reading, watching the telly, doing whatever, not thinking about BDD, not being consumed by Oliver and his problems, or maybe, going somewhere with my other son for an hour to kind of take me out of the home, out of the distressing situation. That started happening, 4 or 5 years ago, but it's still relatively new for me to But I've only been able to do that as Oliver has progressed. And it's almost like he was up here taking all that of my time, and now we're slowly shifting the balance. And that's good for all of us. That's good for me, and it's definitely good for him, because it's part of trying for him to become more independent.
Yeah.
Because that's my ultimate aim.
Absolutely. And I think for many carers, I think they can be just as affected by sleep reversal, can't they? If your child is up all night, you feel like you can't sleep either, and you're worried about them being awake. So, you can start to get really exhausted yourself as a carer. And also just the day-to-day practicalities of sort of caring for someone that you love and seeing them in that amount of distress is really difficult, isn't it, Debbie?
Yeah, and all of it be cooking a meal at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I've got to go to work, and that whole balance to life that's just gone, and you've got to go to work the next day. He's up all night, he's cooking meals, he's asleep all day. Well, that whole, you're dealing with that, it's very draining. I probably should say about reaching out for our own support.
Yeah.
So I've never had any professional support of my own. I have been incredibly lucky to have a great mother, to have a mother who has been my rock and my battering ram. She has been on this journey with me the whole stretch of the way, despite the fact she lives 200 miles away. I'm from Manchester, in case you can't notice, but I now live in the southeast. So having somebody in your life, whoever it is, doesn't have to be your mother, but for me, it has always been my mother. Having somebody in your life that you can share your own, that can effectively be your sounding block, I think is really important. Find somebody, a friend, if it's your partner. For me, it's my mother. I didn't have a partner. My mother stepped into the breach. I think that's really important as well in those moments where you might have to leave the house. So I've left the house and gone for a walk around the block when there's been distress. If you're in your own thoughts, the first thing I would do when I leave the house is ring my mother, and she would counsel me, and she would give me the counsel I needed, and talk to me about other things, what else is going on in the world, and just to deflect from that distress that was going on in the house. I think that's really important to try and find somebody, that you can have those, but again, that goes back to what I said earlier about shedding the shame. You've got to be able to be very honest with that person about the feelings you have. And I have been honest with my mother about some of the feelings I have. Some of those feelings I'm not that proud of right now, or now I'm not that proud of some of the things I said. Some of the feelings I had when Oliver was at his worst, when he was really poorly. I'm not proud of some of the things I thought and the feelings I had, but I still shared them with my mother because it was important that I did that. So finding somebody's pretty crucial as well. That I say I've never had professional help, but I've found my way through, I guess.
Yeah. And I think, thanks, Debbie. And also I think often friends want to really help, don't they? And they don't know how best to help. So once they know, it may be just that they pop round for a cup of tea and you can talk about something that's other than BDD, or you can go for a walk together, or they can bring you some food if you haven't managed to cook a meal or be out the house yourself. You can feel really guilty, can't you, often, to leave the house, or if your child's been up all night, or your loved one's been up all night. It can feel like any activity where it can be seen as enjoyable, like whether it's yoga or, I don't know, going for a run or anything like that, there's enjoyment taken out of it because you feel guilty.
And because you're like, I've got to get back. I can only be out for an hour or whatever. I mean, I didn't have a holiday for 10 years. I didn't go anywhere overnight for many years. And if I had to go away with work, my mum had to come and kind of babysit. Oliver's 26 at this point, but my mum's having to come. She doesn't drive. She's got to get the train. It's quite a big jaunt for a 75. I mean, you know, she's elderly. But yeah, so that kind of, that all consuming feeling that we have, any opportunity you get. I started swimming, could go for a swim, anything that you can get that brings some joy into your life. For me, I was lucky enough to meet somebody and I remarried, and we had weekends away. We used to go away for one night, but it was the first start of me prioritizing myself.
Yeah.
And it didn't do Oliver any harm for me to say, I'm prioritizing myself. I'm going to put myself first. I'm going away for a night and you're on your own. Daniel's here, but fundamentally I'm going, because I think our loved ones can get a bit like that with us. They can get a little bit codependent. They're so dependent on us that the thought of me going somewhere for 2 days is very, very fearful for them. What do you mean you're not going to be here? Yeah, no, I'm not going to be here. But sometimes that's quite powerful to say, I'm actually going to go and have some fun and go to the Cotswolds or wherever it was that we went for a weekend. But, you know, that's important to prioritize yourself. I accept that when your loved one is very poorly, and in my case, suicidal, that's a really difficult thing to do. When you are fearful of them staying alive, and I hope not many people are going through that, because it's a very, very difficult place to be. The thought of just going away, enjoying yourself for a weekend, is probably too difficult for anybody. But in those periods where you're not in that crisis, then finding something that you can do. For me, it was swimming, and I you know, went swimming, and now I've got a little dog that I can take out. That it's my time out of the house. But finding something and somebody that you can offload to, I think, is very important.
Definitely, and also I think, Debbie, is that analogy, I think, it's coming to mind, about putting your oxygen mask on first, isn't it?
Yes.
And keeping your home fires burning, sort of, you know, because otherwise
it's
you
true.
get
It's very
worn
true.
out. You can't actually help your loved one with BDD
It's very
you're so
true.
worn out yourself. Yeah, but
Yeah,
how hard it is. I think
we
it's
hear that a
acknowledging how
lot, and it's in
difficult.
all the textbooks, but it's very true. That looking after yourself is pretty fundamental to you being able to look after your loved one, and not just physically, but also the mental resilience of your own kind of mental resilience, and your physical well-being, of course, but also having the strength to, you know, get up every day and carry on. Like I say, if you do have some real crisis points, sometimes you can't do that. And I think if you can't do that, it doesn't make you a bad parent. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean you're not doing what you should be doing, and it doesn't mean you're making things worse. Sometimes you just have to deal the hand that's given you on that day, and you have to play the hand that's given you, I should say, on that day. And that might be going against all best laid plans. But that I beat myself up about that for a long time, and we need to stop doing that to ourselves, because it doesn't make you a bad parent. What matters more, I think, is what you do next time. Being kind to yourself in the middle of it, and seeking support. And I would say that by supporting your child, your adult, they're adults, but they're still our children, you're already doing something really extraordinary. You're already really, being the best version of the parent that you can be. And something Oliver has said to me, and I know it now. the way I've cared for him, it has been and continues to be the most powerful force in his life. And I think when they are struggling, we should remember that our care, the fact we're caring for them, is very powerful. It's the most powerful force in their life, and Oliver knowing that I was always showing up for him every day and I was there for him every day is probably what kind of kept him going as well, part of it. And I would also say, if you are feeling guilty, think about what you would say to a friend who was, what would you say to a friend, and say that to yourself.
Yeah.
Say that to yourself more than anything. And, you know, everybody's fighting some battle, even if theirs looks different to yours. And gratitude is a strong kind of message for me. Being grateful for what you have in the children in the young people that we have, because they do show remarkable resilience, and that's important.
Definitely. Thank you, Debbie. And I guess it's worth saying that there may be carers out there that are struggling with their own mental health issues, and there is support that you can get. Improving access to psychological therapies, IAPT it's called, is available. You can go to your GP, or you can look online and you can access that for free. So I know it's not extensive therapy often, but there is therapy out there. But there's also the BDD Foundation, and there's other support networks all over the place that you can access online. I think it's just it's worth remembering that
I would say that when I look back at my own past 16 years, there is no doubt that there were times when I clinically was not coping. There is no doubt there were times, but I just carried on and just plowed on. It's come good in the end, but it's come good in the end. But there were times when, you know, it was touch and go for me to think about how I was going to carry on, how I was going to see. I couldn't see the way through. But for me, I had my mother, and I will be, you know, eternally grateful for the support that she gave me. And had it not been for that, then I would no doubt have had to have sought professional support, because, you know, there were times I would speak to my mother for hours every day to just be away from the situation at home. And we think about our loved ones with guilt. I then had the guilt of what I was laying at my mother's door. My mother's 81, she's elderly, and here I am burden isn't the right word. My son is not a burden, and I'm not a burden to her, but you feel like I'm giving her all this to deal with as well at her age. So I've had that guilt as well. You know, that I'm taking up her remainder of her life, which is, you know, she's 81. The time is precious, and I'm kind of taking up large parts of her day with this as well. So that's a feeling for me. But definitely the overriding concept of communication, wherever you find it, is crucial.
Thanks so much, Debbie, and thanks for. I know we're out of time now, but thank you for sharing your story and your insights, because I'm sure it'll be helpful to a lot of people that are tuning in tonight. But also to say thank you to all the carers out there, because, you know, it takes a lot of courage, doesn't it, to show up every day and to care for people, your loved ones and your families, and it's not easy. It's not.
It does. And I would say that when the going is really tough, you should just remember that you're doing your best.
Yeah.
And you're probably stronger than you know. I know I am. I've turned out to be stronger than I ever thought I was going to be. And like I say, the care and love that you're giving your children is very powerful to them.
Definitely. Thanks, Debbie.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks to everyone that's joined us, because I hope it will be the first of many, you know, webinars that we can do. I guess there were so many topics, weren't there, Debbie, that we could have covered?
Absolutely. There's so many topics that affect families, really, who are struggling through BDD or even OCD. That, you know, the family dynamics is a powerful powerful subject, and one that our loved ones they really need the family behind them to go through recovery.
And so I guess we've got an opportunity, not now, but if you've got any questions to, like Kitty said at the beginning, we'd be happy to answer them, won't we?
Yeah,
Debbie, after tonight, and we can get back to you via email.
Yeah, and I'm happy to, if any parents want any other support, I'm happy to respond to anybody that way.
Yeah, and I wish you all the best.